The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of worlds gathered to witness what many called the trial of the century. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Elena Martinez, her weathered face calm despite the chaos surrounding her. She represented the last free humans in the galaxy, and today would decide their fate. The Karathi judge, a towering figure with silver scales and cold yellow eyes, raised his clawed hand for silence. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. The humans have been found guilty of the Terra incident. Their reckless colony ship destroyed our sacred breeding grounds on Karathi Prime's moon. Thousands of our young died because of human carelessness. Elena stepped forward. Your Honor, it was an accident. Our navigation systems failed during the solar storm. We tried to change course, but— Silence! The judge's roar cut her off. The damage is done. Your species has proven too dangerous to remain among civilized worlds. The Council has reached its decision. Around the hall, alien representatives whispered among themselves. Some looked sympathetic, but most seemed relieved. Humans had always been the outsiders in galactic society. They were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too different from the established order. The judge continued, By the power of the Galactic Council, all humans are hereby exiled from civilized space. You will be transported to Kepler 442c, a dead world on the galaxy's edge. There you will remain until the end of your days. Elena's heart sank. She had expected punishment, but not this. Your Honor, that planet cannot support life. You're sentencing 50,000 innocent people to death. That is no longer our concern, the judge replied coldly. Perhaps your species will learn humility in their final days. The trial was over. Guards surrounded Elena and her small diplomatic team, leading them away as the council moved on to other business. Within hours, the great ships began gathering humans from across the galaxy. Families were torn from their homes on mining colonies, research stations, and trading posts. Scientists, farmers, engineers, teachers, children, and elderly all were loaded onto transport vessels like cargo. The journey to Kepler 442c took 3 weeks. The transports were cramped and poorly supplied, clearly meant for short trips, not long voyages. Elena moved through the ships, trying to keep spirits up and organize the chaos. She found herself working with people she had never met before. Dr. Lisa Park, a microbiologist from the Titan Research Station, Marcus Webb, a mining engineer from the asteroid belt, Joe Collins, a farmer from the agricultural world of New Kansas. What do we know about this planet? Elena asked during one of their planning meetings in the transport's cargo hold. Dr. Park pulled up data on her tablet. It's bad. Very bad. The atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide and methane. No oxygen. Surface temperature ranges from -40 to +60 degrees Celsius. Constant radiation storms from the nearby pulsar. No water we can detect. Marcus shook his head. The Karathi aren't just exiling us. They're executing us slowly. Maybe that's what they want us to think, Joe said quietly. The old farmer had been listening carefully. But humans have survived in harsh places before. Our ancestors lived through ice ages, droughts, and plagues. Maybe we can survive this too. Elena looked around at the crowded cargo hold, filled with frightened families and crying children. We have to try, we have no choice. When the transports finally reached Kepler 442c, the sight through the viewports was heartbreaking. The planet looked like a diseased eye staring back at them, gray and brown with swirling toxic clouds and no sign of life anywhere. The transport, pilots, alien mercenaries hired by the Karathi, wasted no time. They landed at the first flat area they found and began unloading their human cargo. The air outside was poison. Everyone had to wear emergency breathing masks, but they only had a few hours of air each. The Karathi had been generous enough to provide basic survival supplies, some prefab shelters, water recyclers, food for maybe 2 months, and basic tools. It was barely enough to set up a temporary camp, let alone build a permanent settlement. This is it, announced the lead pilot, a bug-like creature with multiple eyes. Don't try to signal for rescue. No one is coming back for you. This system is now marked as quarantined. Any ship that comes here will be destroyed. The transports lifted off immediately, leaving the humans alone on the hostile world. Elena stood with the other leaders, watching the ships disappear into the toxic sky. Around them, 50,000 humans began the grim work of trying to survive. The first night was terrible. The prefab shelters could only hold about half the population. The rest had to crowd together in the transport containers that had been left behind. The temperature dropped to -30 degrees, and the wind howled like a living thing. Several elderly people died from the cold and stress. Dr. Park worked frantically with the water recyclers, trying to process the ice they had found in shallow deposits. The machines kept breaking down from the acidic compounds in the frozen water. Marcus led teams to set up the air processors, but they were only meant for small groups, not thousands of people. Joe organized the food distribution, rationing everything carefully. At this rate, we have maybe 60 days before we start starving, he told Elena privately. The second day brought new horrors. A radiation storm swept across their camp, forcing everyone into the deepest shelters they could find. 3 people died from exposure, and dozens more became sick. The emergency medical supplies were already running low. Elena called a meeting of all the group leaders that evening. They gathered in the largest shelter, a cramped space meant for 20 people but holding 50. The faces around her were grim, but she also saw something else: determination. We all know the situation, she began. The Karathi expect us to die here. Maybe they're right. Maybe this planet will kill us all. But I'm not ready to give up, and I don't think you are either. Marcus nodded grimly. The mining equipment in the containers might help us dig deeper shelters. Get us away from the radiation. The water recyclers can be modified, Dr. Park added. I've been studying the chemical composition of the ice. It's toxic, but not impossible to clean. We just need time to figure out how. Joe leaned forward. I've been looking at the soil samples. It's poisonous to earth plants, but maybe we can change that. I've seen farmers reclaim dead land before. An old woman in the corner spoke up. My grandmother survived the resource wars on Earth. She always said humans are like weeds, we grow where nothing else can. Elena felt a spark of hope. Then we start tomorrow. We're not going to just survive. We're going to prove them wrong. This planet thinks it can kill us, but it doesn't know humans very well. Over the next few days, the camp began to organize itself. People were assigned to teams based on their skills. Engineers worked on expanding the shelters and improving the life support systems. Scientists studied the planet's harsh environment, looking for anything they could use. Medical teams treated the sick and rationed their dwindling supplies. Children were kept busy with lessons and games, shielding them from the worst of the adult fears. Teachers worked with parents to maintain some sense of normalcy, even in the poisonous wasteland. Elena found herself becoming the unofficial leader of the entire settlement. People came to her with problems, disputes, and ideas. She realized that their survival would depend not just on technology and resources, but on staying united. In the face of impossible odds, they had to remain human. The Karathi had exiled them to this dead world, expecting them to fade away quietly. They had stripped away their advanced technology, their comfortable lives, their connection to the galaxy, but they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated what humans could do when they had nothing left to lose. As Elena stood outside the main shelter on their 10th night, looking up at the alien stars through her breathing mask, she made a promise to herself and to everyone depending on her. They would not just survive on this dead planet. Somehow, some way, they would make it live. The first winter on Kepler 442c was a nightmare that tested every human on the planet. 3 months after their exile, the settlement had already lost over 2,000 people to radiation sickness, equipment failures, and the brutal cold that could freeze a person solid in minutes. Elena Martinez stood in the main command shelter, studying the grim numbers on her tablet. The settlement's population had dropped from 50,000 to 47,800. Each number represented a person Someone's parent, child, or friend who had died in this poisonous wasteland. The water recyclers are failing faster than we can fix them, Dr. Lisa Park reported, her face drawn with exhaustion. She had been working 18-hour days trying to keep their life support systems running. We've lost 3 more units this week. The acid in the ice is eating through the filters. Marcus Webb looked up from his engineering reports. The radiation shielding on Shelter Block C is cracked. We need to evacuate 50 families, but we don't have anywhere to put them. His hands were stained with chemical burns from handling the toxic materials they used for repairs. Joe Collins entered the shelter, shaking ice crystals from his jacket. The greenhouse domes are holding, but barely. I lost another crop section yesterday. The soil treatment isn't working fast enough. The old farmer had aged 10 years in the past few months, but his eyes still held determination. Elena nodded grimly. What about the deep mining operation? We've hit a layer of bedrock. That's harder than anything we've seen, Marcus replied. The drilling equipment is wearing out and we can't replace it. But we did find something interesting. Mineral deposits that might be useful if we can figure out how to process them. The early days had been pure survival. They had quickly learned that the prefab shelters provided by the Karathi were death traps. The thin walls couldn't handle the temperature swings, and the air recycling systems broke down constantly. Marcus had organized teams to cannibalize the transport containers, using the metal plating to reinforce their shelters and build new ones. The breakthrough came when they realized they had to go underground. The surface was too hostile, with radiation storms that could kill a person in hours and temperature swings that cracked metal. Marcus led the effort to dig deep into the planet's crust, using mining equipment salvaged from the transport ships. We're not just hiding from this planet, he had told his workers. We're going to make it work for us. The underground tunnels became their lifeline. 30 feet below the surface, the temperature was more stable, and the rock provided natural radiation shielding. They carved out living spaces, workshops, and storage areas. It was cramped and dark, but it was safe. Dr. Park's work with the water recycling systems had become critical to their survival. The ice deposits they found were full of toxic compounds that would kill anyone who drank them. But she discovered that certain bacteria from Earth could actually process some of these toxins. It's like a puzzle, she explained to Elena during one of their evening briefings. These bacteria evolved to handle pollution on Earth. Here, they're finding new things to eat. I've been cultivating different strains, trying to find ones that can handle the worst compounds. Her laboratory was a converted storage container filled with jury-rigged equipment. She worked with test tubes and microscopes that had been salvaged from the transport ship's medical bays. Every day brought new experiments, new failures, and occasionally small successes. The food situation was desperate. Joe Collins had been trying to grow earth crops in the alien soil, but everything kept dying. The soil was not just barren, it was actively hostile to earth life. It contained heavy metals and acids that burned plant roots. I've been thinking about this wrong, Joe told Elena one day. I've been trying to make earth plants grow in alien soil. But maybe I need to change the soil first. He began working with Dr. Park to develop soil treatments. They used ash from their fires, organic waste from the settlement, and even human waste to create compost. Slowly, very slowly, they began to see results. The first earth plant to grow in the treated soil was a potato, tough, hardy, and able to survive in harsh conditions. It's not much, Joe said, holding up the small, misshapen potato. But it's life, real earth life growing in alien soil. The success gave everyone hope, but it also highlighted how much work they still had to do. One potato plant could not feed 50,000 people. They needed to scale up everything: the soil treatment, the growing areas, the seed supplies. The children were both the settlement's greatest hope and its greatest worry. They adapted to the harsh conditions better than adults, but they were also more vulnerable to radiation and disease. Elena made sure that the children's areas were the best protected spaces in the settlement. A woman named Kate Thompson organized the children's education. She had been a teacher on New Kansas before the exile, and she refused to let the children's learning stop just because they were stranded on a dead planet. These kids are going to grow up here, she told Elena. They need to know how to survive, but they also need to know that they're still human. They need stories, math, science, art, all of it. The children's classes were held in a converted cargo container, decorated with drawings and maps of Earth. Kate taught them about their home planet, but she also taught them about Kepler 442c. The children learned to identify dangerous radiation levels, to spot signs of equipment failure, and to work together in teams. One of the children, a 10-year-old boy named Tommy, became fascinated with the mining operations. He would spend hours watching Marcus and his team's work, asking endless questions about the equipment and the mineral samples. "This rock is different from the others," Tommy told Marcus one day, holding up a sample he had found. "It's heavier, and it has these little crystal things in it." Marcus examined the sample and his eyes widened. The boy had found a deposit of rare earth metals, materials that could be used to build advanced electronics. It was exactly what they needed to repair and upgrade their failing equipment. "Good eye, kid," Marcus said, ruffling Tommy's hair. "You might just have saved us all." The discovery led to a new mining operation focused on extracting these valuable materials. It was dangerous work in the unstable underground tunnels, but it gave them access to resources they desperately needed. As the months passed, the settlement began to develop its own culture and routines. People worked in shifts to keep the critical systems running 24 hours a day. Meals were communal affairs in the main gathering spaces, with everyone sharing whatever food was available. Elena found herself making decisions that no human leader had ever faced before. When the medical supplies ran low, she had to decide who got treatment and who didn't. When food was scarce, she had to choose between feeding the workers who kept the systems running and the children who represented their future. "I never wanted to be a leader," she confided to Dr. Park one evening. "I was just a diplomat. I dealt with trade agreements and cultural exchanges. I never had to decide who lives and who dies." "None of us wanted this," Dr. Park replied. "But we're the ones who are here. We're the ones who have to make it work." The worst crisis came during month 8, when a massive radiation storm hit the settlement. The early warning systems failed, and the storm was stronger than anything they had experienced before. The surface installations were destroyed, and several underground areas were flooded when the ice melted and then refroze, cracking the tunnel walls. They lost over 1,000 people in 3 days. The medical facilities were overwhelmed, and the surviving equipment was pushed beyond its limits. For a moment, it seemed like the planet had finally won. But then something remarkable happened. The survivors didn't give up. They worked together to rebuild, to rescue the trapped, to care for the wounded. They shared their last food rations and gave their only warm clothes to the sick. Elena watched from the command shelter as people she had never seen before worked side by side to repair the damage. A former corporate executive was carrying supplies for a teenage apprentice mechanic. A retired professor was helping a young mother care for her children while she worked on repairing the water systems. "We're not the same people who were exiled here," she realized. The soft, civilized humans who had depended on galactic society for everything were gone. In their place were harder, tougher people who had learned to survive in hell itself. The first year ended with the settlement still alive, though barely. They had lost over 8,000 people, but the survivors were stronger, more united, and more determined than ever. As Elena looked around at the faces in the command shelter, weathered by radiation, scarred by hard work, but still hopeful, she knew that they had passed their first test. The dead planet had tried to kill them, but they were still here, still human, still fighting, and they were just getting started. 5 years had passed since the exile, and Kepler 442c was no longer the same dead world that had greeted the first human settlers. What had once been a barren wasteland was now dotted with strange silver domes that gleamed against the toxic sky. Steam rose from hidden vents, and the sound of machinery hummed beneath the ground. Elena Martinez, now showing gray in her hair and lines around her eyes, stood on the observation deck of Central Command. The structure had been built into a hillside, its walls made from processed local minerals that sparkled with an inner light. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the settlement that had grown from desperate survival into something approaching civilization. The atmospheric processors are working better than we hoped, Dr. Lisa Park reported, joining Elena at the window. She looked different now, tougher, with calloused hands and burn scars from years of dangerous experiments. Dome 7 achieved 80% Earth normal atmosphere yesterday. We're actually breathing real air in there. The breakthrough had come in year 3, when Dr. Park's bacterial experiments had finally yielded results. She had been working with Earth bacteria, trying to find strains that could survive in the toxic environment. Most died within hours, but a few adapted in unexpected ways. It started with accident, Dr. Park explained to the weekly settlement meeting. I had contaminated samples sitting in the lab when a radiation storm hit. When I came back, the bacteria hadn't just survived, they had multiplied, and they were producing oxygen. The discovery had changed everything. The bacteria were consuming the toxic compounds in the atmosphere and converting them into breathable gases. Dr. Park and her team had spent months learning to cultivate and control the process, but eventually, they had created their first atmospheric processor, a building-sized machine that could slowly transform the air inside a sealed dome. The domes themselves were Marcus Webb's masterpiece. The mining engineer had become the settlement's chief architect, designing structures that could withstand the planet's harsh conditions while housing the atmospheric processors. Each dome was built from refined local materials, metals and crystals, extracted from the planet's crust and processed in furnaces that Marcus had built from salvaged parts. The new dome design is 30% more efficient, Marcus explained to Elena as they walked through construction site 12. Around them, workers in radiation suits were assembling the framework for another dome. We're using the crystalline formations we found in the deep mines. They're incredible. They actually store and focus energy. One of these crystals can power a life support system for a week. The workers had changed too. These weren't the soft colonists who had been exiled 5 years ago. They moved with purpose and efficiency, their bodies hardened by years of dangerous work. They knew their equipment inside and out, because their lives depended on it working perfectly. Joe Collins had become the settlement's agricultural director, overseeing food production that now fed over 45,000 people. The population had recovered from the disasters of the first years, and new children were being born who had never known any world but Kepler 4m42c. The crop yields are up 20% this season, Joe reported, leading Elena through Agricultural Dome 3. Inside the dome, neat rows of vegetables grew under artificial lights, their roots extending into specially treated soil. The soil treatment process is working so well that we're actually improving the quality of the land. The breakthrough in agriculture had come from understanding the planet's unique chemistry. The toxic compounds that killed Earth plants could be neutralized and converted into nutrients through a complex process involving bacteria, heat treatment, and careful chemical balance. Joe had worked with Dr. Park to develop soil that was actually more fertile than many Earth farmlands. See these tomatoes? Joe pointed to plants heavy with red fruit. They're bigger and more nutritious than anything I grew on New Kansas. This planet is teaching us things about farming that we never knew. The children born on Kepler 442c were different from their parents in subtle ways. They adapted to the lower gravity and higher radiation levels better than adults. They learned to read atmospheric readings and equipment diagnostics as easily as children on Earth learned to read books. Tommy, the boy who had discovered the rare Earth deposits, was now 15 and working as an apprentice to Marcus. He moved through the settlement's tunnels and workshops with complete confidence, equally comfortable with advanced electronics and heavy machinery. The new power grid is almost ready, Tommy reported to Elena during her weekly rounds. We're using the crystal arrays to store energy from the geothermal plants. When the next radiation storm hits, we'll actually be able to harvest power from it instead of hiding. The idea of harvesting energy from radiation storms had come from the children. They approached problems differently than adults without preconceived notions about what was possible. Working with the engineering teams, they had developed collector arrays that could capture and store the massive electrical discharges from the storms. Dr. Park's laboratory had evolved into a full research complex, with teams working on dozens of different projects. The bacterial research had branched out into new areas: waste processing, mineral extraction, even primitive manufacturing at the cellular level. "We're not just surviving anymore," Dr. Park told Elena during a tour of the research facilities. "We're innovating. Some of the things we're discovering here could revolutionize science if we ever get back to the galaxy." One of her most promising projects involved using bacteria to process the planet's unusual mineral deposits. The bacteria could extract pure metals and rare compounds from ore that would be impossible to refine using traditional methods. It was slow, but it produced materials of incredible purity and strength. The settlement's manufacturing capabilities had grown far beyond simple repairs and maintenance. They were now producing advanced electronics, precision tools, and even experimental spacecraft components. The workshops hummed with activity as teams worked on projects that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. Marcus had established a technical college where experienced workers taught younger people the skills they would need to keep the settlement running. The classes covered everything from basic electronics to advanced metallurgy, but they also included subjects that no Earth school had ever taught: radiation storm prediction, toxic atmosphere processing, and survival engineering. "These kids are learning things that no human has ever known before," Marcus told Elena. "They're becoming a new kind of engineer, adapted to conditions that would kill most people from the civilized galaxy." The settlement's social structure had evolved too. Leadership positions were earned through competence and dedication rather than political connections. People were valued for their skills and contributions, not their backgrounds or previous status. Elena found herself working closely with a council of department heads who had emerged as natural leaders. Dr. Park oversaw all scientific research. Marcus managed construction and engineering. Joe ran agricultural operations. Kate Thompson had become education director, overseeing both the children's schools and the technical training programs. "We're becoming something new," Elena observed during one of their planning meetings. "We're not the same species that was exiled here. We're harder, smarter, more adaptable." The evidence was everywhere. The settlement now had manufacturing facilities that could produce complex electronics from raw materials. The agricultural domes were yielding surplus food that was being processed and stored. The population was growing again, with new families choosing to have children despite the harsh conditions. Most remarkably, they had begun to expand beyond the original settlement site. Survey teams were exploring other regions of the planet, looking for additional resources and suitable locations for new domes. Some areas showed signs of geothermal activity that could provide abundant energy. Others had unique mineral formations that could be valuable for manufacturing. "We found something amazing in the northern continent," reported Captain Sarah Kim, who led the exploration teams. She was one of the new generation of leaders who had emerged during the settlement's growth. Tough, capable people who had proven themselves through action rather than appointment. "There's a valley system where the atmospheric conditions are naturally less toxic. With minimal processing, we could establish surface settlements there. We're talking about living in the open air for the first time since the exile." The prospect of surface settlements was exciting, but it also raised new challenges. The settlement would need to develop transportation systems to connect distant locations. They would need to establish communication networks and supply chains. They were approaching the complexity of a true planetary civilization. Elena often stood on the observation deck in the evenings, watching the lights of the settlement spread out below her. The sight never failed to amaze her. 5 years ago, this had been a dead world where nothing could survive. Now it was home to a thriving human community that was pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The children who had been born here didn't think of Kepler 442c as a place of exile. To them, it was simply home. They played in the domes and tunnels with the confidence of people who belonged. They learned about Earth from books. 20 years had passed since the first humans set foot on Kepler 442c, and the planet was unrecognizable. Where once there had been only toxic wasteland, now sprawling cities stretched across the landscape under protective domes that glittered like jewels against the alien sky. The transformation was so complete that visitors from Earth's golden age would have struggled to believe this was the same dead world. Elena Martinez, now in her 60s, with silver hair and a face marked by decades of hard decisions, stood in the central tower of New Haven City. The city was the largest of 7 major settlements that dotted the planet's surface, each one a marvel of human engineering and determination. Through the massive windows, she could see the bustling streets below, filled with people who had been born and raised on this world. The population census is complete, reported Director Kate Thompson, who had grown from a simple teacher into the settlement's chief administrator. 215,000 people across all settlements. The birth rate is stable, and we're seeing the first generation of children whose grandparents were born here. The numbers were staggering. From the original 50,000 exiles, minus the 8,000 lost in the early years, the population had grown to over 200,000. This wasn't just survival. It was a population boom that showed how completely humans had adapted to their new world. Captain Alex Rivers entered the office, still wearing the dust-stained uniform of a space pilot. At 35, he had been born on Kepler 442c and had never known any other world. He represented the new generation of humans who thought of the toxic storms and radiation as natural parts of life. The trading mission to the Kepler system was a complete success, he reported with satisfaction. The independent merchants were amazed by our technology. They're calling our atmospheric processors miracle machines, and our quantum computers impossible magic. We've established regular trade routes with 5 different worlds. The development of interstellar travel had been one of the settlement's greatest achievements. Using the unique crystalline formations found deep in the planet's crust, human engineers had developed quantum computing systems that surpassed anything in the known galaxy. These computers could calculate navigation routes through the dangerous radiation fields that surrounded Kepler 442c, allowing ships to travel safely between star systems. Dr. Lisa Park, now the settlement's chief scientist, joined the meeting. Her hair was white and her hands were permanently stained from decades of chemical work, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She had become the mother of an entirely new branch of science, what the settlers called hostile world engineering. The atmospheric processors are working beyond our wildest dreams, she reported. We now have 12 major dome cities with Earth-normal atmosphere, and we're working on a project to terraform an entire continent. The bacterial colonies we've developed don't just clean the air, they're actually improving it. The oxygen levels in some domes are higher than Earth standard. The scientific advances had been remarkable. Working with limited resources and under impossible conditions, the human scientists had developed technologies that seemed almost magical. They had learned to program bacteria to do precise work, to grow living machines that could repair themselves, and to harvest energy from sources that the civilized galaxy had never imagined. Marcus Webb, now chief of planetary engineering, spread holographic displays across the conference table. The images showed construction projects that would have challenged the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. Massive towers rose from the planet's surface, connected by enclosed bridges that spanned kilometers. Underground cities burrowed deep into the planet's crust, their walls lined with the glowing crystals that provided both power and light. The orbital station project is ahead of schedule, Marcus reported. We'll have our first space-based manufacturing facility operational within 2 years. The microgravity environment will let us grow crystals that are impossible to create on the surface. The orbital stations were perhaps the most ambitious project yet attempted. Using materials mined from the planet's crust and refined through bacterial processing, human engineers were building permanent installations in orbit around Kepler 442c. These stations would serve as shipyards, research facilities, and gateways to the galaxy beyond. The children of Kepler 442c had grown into adults who were fundamentally different from their parents. They moved with casual confidence in environments that would kill most galactic citizens within minutes. They understood complex scientific concepts that the best universities in the galaxy struggled to teach. They were equally comfortable with advanced technology and primitive survival skills. Tommy, the boy who had discovered the first rare Earth deposits, was now 35 and served as the settlement's chief resource manager. He had spent his entire adult life exploring the planet's hidden treasures, mapping mineral deposits and geological formations that held the keys to humanity's future. The deep core samples are showing something extraordinary, he reported to the weekly council meeting. There's a layer of crystalline formations about 2 kilometers down that spans the entire planet. If we can tap into it, we'll have enough energy to power our civilization for thousands of years. The planet's geology had turned out to be far more complex than anyone had imagined. The toxic surface conditions were caused by relatively recent volcanic activity, but beneath the poison crust lay treasures that made the world invaluable. Rare metals, energy-storing crystals, and geological formations that could be used for advanced manufacturing were scattered throughout the planet's depths. The social structure of the settlements had evolved into something unique in the galaxy. Leadership was based on competence and merit rather than politics or wealth. People were valued for their contributions to the community's survival and growth. The harsh conditions had eliminated many of the social problems that plagued civilized worlds. There was no room for corruption, laziness, or selfishness when everyone's survival depended on working together. Elena often walked through the settlements, in the evening, observing how the community had developed. Children played in parks under artificial skies, their laughter echoing through the domes. Adults worked in workshops and laboratories, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Elderly, people shared stories of Earth and the early days of the settlement, keeping the community's history alive. We've become something the galaxy has never seen before, Elena reflected during one of her conversations with Dr. Park. We're not just another human colony. We're a new kind of civilization. The evidence was everywhere. The settlements produced technology that was more advanced than anything in the Karathi Empire. Their manufacturing techniques were cleaner and more efficient than the standard galactic methods. Their social systems were more stable and fair than the hierarchical structures that dominated civilized space. Most importantly, they were completely self-sufficient. They grew their own food, manufactured their own equipment, and generated their own energy. They had no need for imports from the galaxy, but they had plenty of exports that other worlds desperately wanted. The quantum computers built on Kepler 442c could perform calculations that required entire facilities on other worlds. The atmospheric processors could make any world habitable within a few years. The bacterial manufacturing systems could produce pure materials from the most contaminated sources. We're getting requests from independent worlds throughout the galaxy, Captain Rivers reported during one of his briefings. They want to hire us to help with their environmental problems. Some of them are offering incredible amounts of money for just one atmospheric processor. The irony was not lost on Elena. The same technology that had saved humanity from extinction was now in high demand throughout the galaxy. The dead world that was supposed to be their grave had become the source of their greatest strength. The trading missions had also brought disturbing news about the galaxy beyond. The Karathi Empire was facing internal problems, resource shortages, environmental damage, and social unrest. Their rigid social system was breaking down as younger generations questioned the old ways of doing things. Some of the independent merchants are asking about asylum, Captain Rivers reported. They want to come here, to learn our ways. They say their own worlds are becoming unlivable. Elena was not surprised. The same arrogance and rigid thinking that had led the Karathi to exile humanity was now causing problems throughout their empire. They had always believed that their way was the only way, that their technology and social systems were superior to all others. Now they were discovering that their approach had serious flaws. The settlements on Kepler 442c had proven that there were other ways to build a civilization. They had shown that cooperation was stronger than hierarchy, that innovation was more valuable than tradition, and that adaptation was better than rigid adherence to old methods. We need to start thinking about our role in the galaxy, Elena told the council during their strategic planning session. We're not just survivors anymore. We're not even just a successful colony. We're becoming a major power, whether we want to or not. The transformation was complete. The humans exiled to a dead world had not just survived, they had thrived beyond anyone's wildest imagination. 40 years after the exile, the Karathi Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. expecting to find the scattered bones of a failed human settlement. Instead, Admiral Zektar found himself staring at something that defied every assumption his species had held about the universe. "This cannot be correct," the Admiral muttered, his scaled hands gripping the command chair as he studied the sensor readings. The scanners show massive energy signatures, orbital installations, and... are those ships? His aide, Commander Velkan, checked the instruments twice before responding. "Sir, we're detecting at least 50 spacecraft of unknown design in orbit around the planet. The surface shows multiple cities, atmospheric processors, and what appears to be industrial complexes." Admiral Zektar had been a young officer during the human exile. He remembered the trial, the speeches about teaching the lesser species their place in the galaxy. The dead planet was supposed to be a warning to other worlds about the consequences of defying the Karathi Empire. "Establish communication with the human settlement," he ordered. "They will surrender immediately and prepare for reintegration into civilized society." The response came not from a desperate survival bunker, but from a gleaming orbital station that dwarfed the largest Karathi installations. The human who appeared on the view screen was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and confident eyes that showed no fear of the Imperial fleet. "I am President Maria Santos of the Human Coalition," she said calmly. "Welcome to Kepler 442c, Admiral. We've been expecting you." Maria Santos had been elected president 3 years earlier, following Elena Martinez's retirement. She had been born on Kepler 442c and had never known any world but this one. To her, the toxic storms and radiation fields were as natural as sunshine had been to her parents' generation on Earth. "I am Admiral Zektar of the Karathi Imperial Navy," he replied, trying to maintain his authority despite his shock at the sophisticated communication system. "By order of the Galactic Council, you will prepare for immediate evacuation and return to designated human settlements within the Empire." Maria's expression didn't change, but there was something in her eyes that made the Admiral uncomfortable. It was the look of someone who held all the advantages and knew it. "That's a generous offer, Admiral, but we must decline. Kepler 442c is our home now. We have no intention of leaving." Behind Maria, through the viewports of the orbital station, the Admiral could see a bustling city in space. Ships moved between docking ports, and humans in environmental suits worked on construction projects that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The technology on display was clearly beyond anything the Karathi possessed. "You do not have a choice in this matter," Admiral Zektar said, his voice rising. "The Karathi Empire has decided to show mercy and readmit humanity to galactic society. You will comply." "Will we?" Maria asked with a slight smile. "Captain Rivers, would you please demonstrate our position?" The space around the Karathi fleet suddenly filled with activity. Ships appeared from behind asteroids and planetary debris where they had been hidden. The vessels were unlike anything the Admiral had ever seen, sleek, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them. They moved with impossible speed and agility, surrounding the Imperial fleet in a matter of minutes. "How many ships do they have?" Admiral Zektar demanded. "Over 200, sir," Commander Velkan replied, his voice shaking. "And, sir, our weapon systems aren't responding. Something is interfering with our targeting computers." Captain Alex Rivers appeared on a secondary communication channel, his voice calm and professional. "Admiral, your ships are currently experiencing technical difficulties due to our quantum interference systems. Your weapons and navigation are temporarily disabled for your own safety." The Admiral felt a chill run down his spine. The humans had not just survived on the dead planet. They had developed technology that could neutralize the most advanced warships in the galaxy without firing a shot. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Your species was barely capable of basic space travel when you were exiled." 40 years is a long time, Admiral," President Santos replied. "We've learned a great deal about survival, adaptation, and innovation. Would you like a tour of our facilities? I think you'll find our achievements quite impressive." The tour was a revelation that shattered every assumption the Karathi had held about human capabilities. The orbital stations were marvels of engineering that utilized technologies the Empire's best scientists couldn't comprehend. The planetary cities existed in environments that would kill most galactic species within minutes, yet humans lived there comfortably, even thriving. Dr. Lisa Park, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, led the scientific demonstration. She showed the Karathi delegation bacterial manufacturing systems that could produce pure materials from toxic waste, atmospheric processors that could terraform entire continents, and quantum computers that solved problems in seconds that would take Karathi systems years to calculate. "We've had to develop solutions to problems your empire has never faced," she explained to the stunned alien visitors. "When you're exiled to a world that actively tries to kill you, you either innovate or die. We chose to innovate." The Karathi delegation was escorted through manufacturing facilities where humans worked alongside living machines grown from modified bacteria. They saw farms producing food in soil that had been toxic wasteland 4 decades earlier. They witnessed children learning advanced physics and engineering as naturally as their own young learned basic mathematics. Commander Velkan, who served as the delegation's technical expert, was particularly shaken by what he observed. "These aren't the same humans we exiled," he reported to Admiral Zektar. "They've become something else entirely. Their technology is decades ahead of ours in critical areas." The social structure of the human settlements was equally impressive. The Karathi observers expected to find the rigid hierarchies and power, struggles that characterize their own society. Instead, they found a cooperative system where leadership was based on competence and contribution rather than birth or political connections. Tommy, now the settlement's chief resource coordinator, explained their approach during a meeting with the Karathi delegation. "We couldn't afford the luxury of inefficient leadership. When everyone's survival depends on making the right decisions, you naturally choose the people who make the best choices." The economic implications were staggering. The human settlements were completely self-sufficient and produced surplus goods that were in high demand throughout the galaxy. Independent traders were already establishing regular routes to Kepler 442c, bringing news and resources from dozens of worlds. "Half the independent systems in this sector want to establish trade agreements with us," Captain Rivers reported to President Santos during a private briefing. "They're offering incredible terms for our technology and expertise." Admiral Zektar found himself in an impossible position. He had come to collect a failed human colony, and instead discovered a thriving civilization that surpassed the Karathi Empire in several critical technologies. His superiors expected him to return with submissive humans ready to accept their place in the galactic hierarchy. Instead, he was facing a confident, powerful society that had no need for what the Empire offered. "Your people must return to designated settlements," he insisted during his final meeting with President Santos. "The exile was temporary. The Empire is prepared to forgive past transgressions and restore humanity to its proper place in galactic society." President Santos leaned back in her chair, surrounded by advisors who represented the best minds of 2 generations. "And what would that proper place be, Admiral? Second-class citizens in someone else's empire, grateful recipients of Karathi charity? You would have the protection of the Empire, access to galactic markets, participation in civilized society," the Admiral replied, though his words sounded hollow even to himself. "We already have access to galactic markets through our trading partners," Maria pointed out. "As for protection, I think we've demonstrated that we can take care of ourselves. And as for civilized society, well, I think we've built something better than what you're offering." The final demonstration came when a Karathi patrol ship, acting without authorization, attempted to force its way past the human defensive perimeter. The ship found itself gently but irresistibly guided to a safe orbit, its systems completely overridden by human technology. The crew was unharmed but thoroughly humbled. "We could have destroyed your ship in a dozen different ways," Captain Rivers explained to the patrol ship's commander. "Instead, we chose to demonstrate restraint. That's the difference between your civilization and ours." Admiral Zektar realized that his mission had failed completely. The humans were not the desperate exiles he had expected to find. They were a major power in their own right, with technology and resources that made them valuable allies or dangerous enemies. His final report to the Karathi, High Council was a masterpiece of diplomatic understatement. The human settlement has achieved unexpected success. Recommend immediate diplomatic engagement and reconsideration of previous policies. President Santos's response to the Empire's generous offer was broadcast throughout the galaxy, carried by independent traders and transmitted by
The stars stretched endlessly before the stellar dawn as it cruised through the Orion arm of the galaxy. Captain James Walker stood at the bridge's main viewport, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. 20 years of space service had taught him to trust his gut. And right now, something felt off. "Status report," he called out, his voice steady despite his unease. "All systems normal, Captain," replied Ann Miller from her engineering station. Her fingers danced across the holographic controls as she monitored the ship's vital signs. "The new quantum drive is performing exactly as expected." Robert Thompson looked up from his science station, his gray eyes reflecting the blue glow of his screens. "Long-range scans are clear. We should reach the diplomatic rendezvous point in approximately 6 hours." The Stellar Dawn was humanity's pride, their most advanced ship and a symbol of how far they'd come since first reaching for the stars. Its sleek design and powerful engines represented the best of human engineering. The ship carried Earth's diplomatic team to a historic meeting with the Galactic Council, where humanity would finally take its place among the spacefaring races. Walker was about to respond when the ship's sensors suddenly screamed to life. Red warning lights flooded the bridge as Thompson's hands flew across his console. Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Thompson shouted, "Configuration unknown. They're not in our database." Before Walker could issue orders, 3 massive vessels materialized around the Stellar Dawn. Their dark hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and their design was unlike anything humanity had encountered before. They were all sharp angles and geometric patterns, with no visible weapons or propulsion systems. "Open all communication channels," Walker commanded, maintaining his composure. "This is Captain James Walker of the Earth Alliance vessel Stellar Dawn. We are on a diplomatic mission and—" A harsh, grating sound cut through the ship's speakers, making several crew members wince. When it stopped, a cold, artificial voice spoke in perfect English. "Humans, your presence in space has been evaluated. You have been found wanting." Ann's console erupted in warnings. "Captain, they're scanning us. But these aren't normal scans. They're somehow interfacing with our systems." The ship shuddered as invisible forces began to tear at its hull. Walker watched in horror as sections of the Stellar Dawn's outer armor began to peel away like paper in a strong wind. The unknown aliens weren't just attacking them. They were systematically taking their ship apart. "Shields at maximum," Walker ordered. "Evasive maneuvers." "Shields are having no effect," Ann reported, her voice tight with frustration. "Whatever they're using, it's bypassing all our defenses. It's like they're unmaking us at a molecular level." The artificial voice spoke again. "We are the Vex. Your technological advancement follows an unacceptable pattern. Your species relies too heavily on emotion and instinct. You are inefficient, chaotic, a potential threat to galactic stability." Walker gripped his command chair as the ship lurched violently. "Get us out of here. Emergency jump. The quantum drive isn't responding." Ann's fingers flew across her controls. "They've locked onto our systems somehow. I'm trying to. Wait." Her eyes widened. "Captain, they're copying our database. They're stealing everything. Our technology, our research, our defense protocols." Through the viewport, Walker watched as pieces of his ship floated away into space. The Stellar Dawn, humanity's greatest achievement, was being dissected like a lab specimen. The bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, but nothing they tried had any effect on the Vex ships. "Your species will cease all space exploration immediately," the Vex voice announced. "Return to your planet. Any further attempts to expand beyond your solar system will result in your extinction. We have analyzed your capabilities fully. you cannot resist." Walker exchanged looks with his senior officers. Ann's face was flushed with anger, while Thompson's expression was one of fascination despite their dire situation. They all knew what this meant. Humanity was being caged, locked away in their own solar system by a species that viewed them as little more than troublesome animals. "Emergency power to the quantum drive," Walker commanded. "Reroute everything we have left." Anne shook her head. "Sir, we've lost 30% of our hull. If we try to jump now, better to risk it than surrender humanity's future to these things," Walker cut in. "Do it." Anne nodded and began the emergency procedures. The ship groaned around them as power was diverted from every remaining system to the quantum drive. Warning klaxons blared as multiple systems redlined. The Vex voice returned. "Your attempts to resist air." The rest of the message was cut off as Anne slammed her hand down on the emergency jump activation. The damaged Stellar Dawn lurched sickeningly as it tore its way into quantum space. The bridge crew was thrown against their stations as the ship shuddered and screamed around them. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 7. Thompson reported over the noise. "We're losing atmosphere. Emergency containment fields holding at 60%. Anne added, "The quantum drive is way beyond safety limits. We need to drop out now." Walker held on as his ship fell apart around him. "Get us as far as we can. We need to warn Earth." The next few minutes were chaos as the Stellar Dawn limped through quantum space, bleeding atmosphere, and leaving a trail of debris behind it. When they finally dropped back to normal space, the ship was barely recognizable as the proud vessel that had started the journey. Anne's voice was quiet as she read out the damage report. "We've lost most of our outer hull. Life support is running on backups. The quantum drive is, well, it's basically molten slag now. But we're alive." She looked up at Walker. "And we're still in space." Walker stood slowly, looking at his battered but unbowed crew. "Send out a distress signal to Earth. They need to know what happened here. The Vex thought they could break us, send us running back to our planet with our tails between our legs." He walked to the viewport, where Earth's sun was visible as a distant point of light. "But they made a mistake. They showed us their power, their technology. And now," he turned to face his crew, his expression hardening with determination, "now we know what we're up against. They broke our ship." A smile slowly spread across his face. "Then we'll just have to build a better one." Anne and Thompson exchanged looks, and Walker could see the same fire in their eyes that he felt in his heart. The Vex had meant to discourage humanity from reaching for the stars. Instead, they had just given humanity's best and brightest the challenge of a lifetime. As emergency beacons activated and the backup systems hummed around them, Walker knew that this wasn't the end of humanity's journey to the stars. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. The Vex had shown their hand. And in doing so, they had given humanity exactly what it needed to surpass them. The race to build humanity's answer to the Vex threat had begun. The Luna shipyards buzzed with activity as engineers and workers moved across its vast construction base. 3 weeks had passed since the Stellar Dawn limped back to Earth, and humanity had not wasted a single minute. The attack had shaken Earth to its core, but instead of cowering in fear, people had responded with determination. Ann Miller stood in front of a holographic display, studying the twisted pieces of metal that had once been part of the Stellar Dawn's hull. Dark circles under her eyes showed how little she had slept, but there was an intense focus in her gaze. "Look at this," she said as Captain Walker approached. "The Vex didn't just tear our ship apart. They rewrote its basic structure. The metal itself was transformed at an atomic level." Walker leaned closer to the display. "Can we replicate it?" "Better." Anne's tired face broke into a smile. "We can improve it. The Vex are incredibly advanced, but they're also rigid. They do everything the same way, every time. But we humans, we get creative." She waved her hand, and the hologram changed to show a new ship design. It was unlike anything humanity had built before. a perfect blend of sharp Vex-like angles and smooth human curves. "I call it Project Phoenix," she said. "We're not just going to rebuild. We're going to take everything we learned from the Vex attack and make something entirely new." Robert Thompson walked in, carrying a stack of data tablets. "The quantum field analysis is complete," he announced. "You won't believe what we found in the debris." He set down the tablets and pulled up his own holographic display. "The Vex don't just use technology. They fold space and time around themselves. But their method is wasteful. They brute force their way through dimensional barriers." "And you think we can do better?" Walker asked. Thompson nodded eagerly. "Much better. Human brains are amazingly good at recognizing patterns and making intuitive leaps. We've already found 3 ways to improve their quantum field manipulation techniques." The project grew rapidly. Word spread across Earth about the ambitious plan, and soon the best minds from every nation were arriving at Luna shipyards. The old rivalries between countries faded as humanity united against a common threat. In one of the smaller research labs, Anne worked with a team testing new hull materials. They had discovered that by introducing controlled chaos into the molecular structure, they could make metals that were both stronger and more adaptable than anything the Vex had shown. "It's like teaching the metal to think," she explained to Walker during one of his daily visits. "The Vex build perfect structures, but perfection is fragile. Our design embraces imperfection, uses it as a strength." But not everyone agreed with their approach. In a heated meeting with Earth's military leaders, several generals demanded they focus on building weapons instead of a new exploration vessel. "The Vex threatened to destroy us," one general thundered, pounding his fist on the table. "We need battleships, not some fancy science project." Walker stood up slowly, commanding attention without raising his voice. "The Vex didn't attack us because we were weak," he said. "They attacked because they feared what we might become. If we respond with only weapons and war, we prove them right. But if we build something greater, something that shows the true potential of humanity." He let his words hang in the air. The room fell silent as his message sank in. Finally, the project received full approval to continue as planned. Weeks turned into months as the work continued. The new ship took shape in the largest construction bay, its hull gleaming under the work lights. But with progress came problems. Strange accidents began to plague the project. Key components would fail for no reason. Computer systems would crash, and crucial data would vanish. "It's too organized to be random," Thompson said one evening as they reviewed another system failure. "I think the Vex left something behind. Some kind of sabotage program buried in the technology we salvaged." Anne worked for 3 days straight, reviewing every piece of code and every component. She finally found it. Microscopic machines hidden within the salvaged Vex technology, programmed to cause subtle failures. But instead of destroying them, she did something unexpected. She reprogrammed them, teaching them to work with human systems instead of against them. It was exactly the kind of adaptive thinking the Vex couldn't understand. The real breakthrough came during a test of the new quantum drive system. Thompson had theorized that human emotions actually created unique patterns in quantum fields, patterns that could be used to enhance the ship's capabilities. "The Vex see emotions as noise, as interference," he explained. "But what if they're actually a form of quantum information processing? What if our feelings are actually connecting with reality in ways their pure logic can't match?" They tested his theory by linking the quantum drive to human brainwave patterns. The results were astonishing. The drive didn't just work. It worked better than anything they had ever built. It responded to intuition, to intention, forming connections that pure mathematics said should be impossible. "Don't you see?" Anne exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement as she reviewed the test results. "This is why the Vex wanted to stop us. They saw that we would surpass them, not through superior technology, but by thinking differently, by feeling differently." The project continued to evolve. They discovered that human creativity could be channeled into the ship's systems, making them more adaptable and resilient. The vessel wouldn't just be controlled by its crew. It would work with them, learn from them, grow with them. As the ship neared completion, Walker stood with Anne and Thompson in the observation room, looking out at their creation. The vessel's hull seemed to shift and flow in the light, its surface a testament to the marriage of human intuition and advanced technology. "It's beautiful," Anne said softly. "Not perfect like a Vex ship, but better because of it." Thompson nodded in agreement. "Every piece of technology they used to try to destroy us, we've turned into something new, something uniquely human." Walker smiled as he watched workers applying the final touches to the hull. The ship before them wasn't just humanity's answer to the Vex threat. It was proof that there were many paths to advancement, and that emotion and intuition were not weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths to be embraced. "The Vex wanted to keep us grounded," Walker said. "Instead, they gave us wings. Now it's time to show them how high humanity can really fly." The new ship's systems hummed with power as Ann Miller ran another series of tests. She hadn't left the Luna shipyards in 3 days, and her hand shook slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. The project was entering its most critical phase, and no one wanted to take any chances. "You should get some rest," Thompson said, looking up from his own workstation. "You're no good to the project if you collapse." Anne shook her head. "I'm fine. Besides, something's still not right with the quantum field harmonics. The numbers don't add up." Before Thompson could argue further, a loud explosion rocked the testing chamber. Alarms blared as smoke poured from a ruptured power conduit. Anne rushed to the emergency controls, her fatigue forgotten as she worked to contain the damage. "What happened?" Walker demanded, running into the room. "Status report. Power spike in the main quantum matrix," Anne replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "But it doesn't make sense. All the safety protocols were in place. This shouldn't have been possible." Thompson was already reviewing the system logs. "This is the 3rd accident this week," he said grimly. "And look at this." He pointed to his screen, where lines of code scrolled past. "These power fluctuations aren't random. They're following a pattern, a Vex pattern." Walker's face hardened. "They're still watching us, still trying to stop us." "Not just watching," Anne said, wiping soot from her face. "They're learning. Each accident targets a different system, like they're testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses." The next few weeks brought more challenges. Critical components would mysteriously fail their final inspections. Computer systems would crash at crucial moments. Even the artificial gravity would occasionally flicker, sending tools and equipment floating through the construction base. But with each setback, the team grew stronger. They learned to think like the Vex, to anticipate their sabotage attempts. More importantly, they learned to think beyond the Vex, finding solutions their alien adversaries would never consider. One evening, as Anne was reviewing the latest system diagnostics, she noticed something strange. The ship's quantum field wasn't just active during tests. It was responding to the emotions of the workers around it. When the engineering team was frustrated, the field became more chaotic. When they were focused and determined, it stabilized. "Look at this," she called to Thompson, who was working nearby. "The ship, it's not just accepting our commands. It's connecting with us, learning from us." Thompson studied the readings with growing excitement. The Vex tried to program it to fail, but instead, it's adapting. Like a living thing. He paused, his eyes widening. "No, not like a living thing. Like a human." They brought their discovery to Walker, who immediately saw the possibilities. "Can we strengthen this connection? Make it part of the ship's core systems?" Anne nodded slowly, her mind already racing with ideas. "We'd need to completely redesign the control interfaces. Make them more intuitive. Less about pushing buttons and more about working together." The next phase of construction took an unexpected turn. Instead of fighting against the Vex interference, they began using it. Every attempt at sabotage became an opportunity to learn, to adapt, to grow stronger. The ship's systems became more resilient, more flexible, more human. During one test, Anne made a critical breakthrough. She was running a routine power check when another Vex-induced surge hit the systems. But this time, instead of trying to block it, she let it flow through the ship's quantum field. To everyone's amazement, the field didn't collapse. It absorbed the surge, grew stronger, and then reshaped itself into a more stable configuration. "It's like immunity," she explained to Walker later. "The more the Vex try to break us, the stronger we become. We're not just building a ship anymore. We're teaching it to evolve." The project entered its final stages. The ship's hull gleamed in the work lights, its surface seeming to shift and flow like liquid metal. Inside, the control systems were unlike anything humanity had built before. There were still screens and controls, but they were secondary to the neural interfaces that would allow the crew to work in perfect harmony with their vessel. Then came the day of the first full system test. Anne stood at the primary control station, her hands hovering over the neural interface pads. Thompson monitored the quantum field readings while Walker watched from the observation deck with Earth's military leaders. "Beginning power-up sequence," Anne announced. The ship's systems came online one by one, each connecting smoothly with the others. The quantum field stabilized, forming a perfect bubble around the vessel. Everything was going perfectly, too perfectly. Anne felt a sudden chill. "Something's wrong," she said. "This is exactly what the Vex would expect. We need tow." The ship's power grid suddenly surged, overloading every system simultaneously. Warning lights flashed as the quantum field began to collapse. On the monitors, they could see Vex code emerging from hidden corners of the ship's programming, trying to tear it apart from the inside. "They've been waiting for this," Thompson shouted over the alarms. "They knew we'd try to perfect everything for the first test." Anne's hands flew over the controls, but nothing responded. The ship's systems were locked up, caught in a death spiral of cascading failures. In the observation deck, the military leaders were already calling for an emergency shutdown. But Anne saw something else in the readings, a pattern in the chaos, a rhythm in the destruction. Without thinking, she placed her hands directly on the neural interface pads. "What are you doing?" Thompson yelled. "The safety protocols are offline." "Exactly," Anne replied through gritted teeth. "No protocols, no perfect solutions, just human instinct." The neural link activated, and suddenly Anne could feel the ship's systems as if they were extensions of her own body. She felt the Vex code trying to impose its rigid patterns, its perfect order. And she responded not with programmed defenses, but with the beautiful chaos of human thought. The ship's quantum field flickered, then stabilized in a completely new configuration. Power levels that should have been impossible became steady. Systems that should have burned out began to heal themselves. "It's working," Thompson breathed, staring at his readings in amazement. "The field, it's not just stable, it's stronger than anything we've ever measured." In the observation deck, Walker smiled. The Vex had tried to destroy their project by forcing it to follow their rules of perfect order. Instead, they had helped create something entirely new, a ship that could think, feel, and adapt just like its human crew. As the test concluded successfully, Anne finally stepped away from the controls, exhausted but triumphant. They had done more than just survive the Vex's attempts to stop them. They had proven that humanity's greatest strengths were the very things the Vex saw as weaknesses. The ship was ready. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humanity could really do. The day of the ship's official unveiling arrived with a mix of excitement and tension. Thousands gathered at Luna shipyards, while millions more watched through video feeds across Earth. In the launch bay, the newly christened Phoenix Ascendant waited, its hull catching the light in ways that made it seem alive. Walker stood before the assembled crowd, his uniform crisp and neat. "When the Vex attacked us, they thought they were showing us our place in the galaxy. Instead, they showed us our potential. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you humanity's answer to those who would keep us earthbound." The massive bay doors opened, revealing the Phoenix Ascendant in all its glory. Gasps of wonder echoed through the crowd. The ship was beautiful, but not in the cold, geometric way of Vex vessels. It had an organic quality to its design, as if it had grown rather than been built. Anne and Thompson waited on the bridge, running final checks on the ship's systems. The neural interface hummed with quiet energy, ready to connect with its crew. Every station was designed to work with human intuition rather than against it. All systems are green, and reported as Walker joined them on the bridge. The quantum field is stable, and the neural links are operating at peak efficiency. Then let's show everyone what she can do, Walker said, settling into the captain's chair. As soon as he touched the neural interface panels, he felt the ship's presence in his mind, not as an alien machine, but as a partner ready to work with him. The demonstration began with basic maneuvers, but even these showed how different the Phoenix Ascendant was from traditional ships. It moved with impossible grace, responding to its crew's thoughts almost before they formed. The quantum field rippled and shifted, adapting to each movement with fluid precision. Thompson monitored the readings with a growing smile. The field harmonics are perfect. Better than perfect. They're evolving. Every move we make teaches the ship something new. They demonstrated the ship's defensive capabilities next. Drone targets appeared around the vessel, firing simulated weapons. The Phoenix Ascendant's shields didn't just block the attacks. They learned from them, becoming stronger with each hit. "Look at this," Anne called out, pointing to her display. The quantum field isn't just defending against the attacks. It's analyzing them, understanding them, improving itself. The crowd watched in amazement as the ship performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. It could alter its quantum state almost instantly, seeming to be in multiple places at once. Its hull could reconfigure itself on the fly, adapting to any situation. But the real test came unexpectedly. During a high-speed maneuver, Thompson's sensors picked up an anomaly. "Energy spike," he shouted. "Something's coming through." A familiar dark shape emerged from space nearby. A Vex scout ship. It had been watching, waiting for this moment. Before anyone could react, it fired a beam of energy directly at the Phoenix Ascendant. The crowd gasped, expecting destruction. But something incredible happened instead. The quantum field caught the beam, not just blocking it, but absorbing its energy. The ship's systems processed the attack, learned from it, grew stronger. Walker felt the ship's response through the neural link. It wasn't afraid or angry. It was curious, eager to learn, just like its human crew. "Send them a message," he ordered. "Show them what we've learned." The Phoenix Ascendant's quantum field expanded, reaching out to the Vex vessel. But instead of attacking, it began to communicate in pure energy patterns. The Vex ship's systems tried to resist, tried to impose their rigid order, but they couldn't match the fluid adaptability of human-enhanced technology. "Their shields are failing," Thompson reported, but his voice held no triumph. "No, not failing. They're changing, adapting to match our patterns." Through the neural link, Walker could feel the Vex ship's confusion. Its perfectly ordered systems were encountering something they couldn't categorize, technology that grew and changed, guided by human emotion and intuition. The Vex vessel retreated, vanishing back into quantum space, but they had learned something valuable. The Vex could be surprised. Their perfect logic could be overcome not by superior force, but by human unpredictability. As the demonstration continued, Anne noticed something remarkable in the ship's systems. "The quantum field," she said excitedly. "It's not just copying Vex technology anymore. It's creating entirely new configurations, things even they haven't thought of." They pushed the ship harder, testing its limits. The Phoenix Ascendant responded by exceeding every expectation. Its quantum drive could fold space in ways that made Vex calculations look crude by comparison. Its adaptive hull could transform to meet any challenge. And through it all, the neural link grew stronger, the connection between ship and crew becoming deeper and more intuitive. Walker addressed the crowd one final time as the demonstration concluded. "The Vex thought they could contain us by showing us how far ahead of us they were. But they didn't understand something fundamental about humanity. We don't just copy what we see. We imagine what could be. We don't just learn. We innovate. And most importantly, we don't just build machines. We create partnerships. The Phoenix Ascendant hung in space above the moon, its quantum field shimmering with possibilities. It represented more than just humanity's response to the Vex threat. It was proof that there were many paths to advancement in the universe, and that emotion and instinct could be just as powerful as cold logic. In the ship's heart, human and machine worked together in ways the Vex had never imagined possible. Each crew member's thoughts and feelings flowed through the neural network, making the ship more than the sum of its parts. It wasn't just a vessel anymore. It was humanity's dream of the future given form. As the celebration began on Earth, Walker looked at his crew with pride. They had done more than build a powerful ship. They had shown that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in trying to match the Vex's perfect order, but in embracing the beautiful chaos of human creativity. The Phoenix Ascendant was ready for its real mission. Soon, they would take it into deep space, not to challenge the Vex, but to show them and the rest of the galaxy that there was more than one way to reach for the stars. 3 months after its unveiling, the Phoenix Ascendant patrolled the edges of Earth's solar system. The crew had settled into a comfortable rhythm, learning something new about their remarkable ship every day. But they all knew this peace wouldn't last. The Vex wouldn't stay away forever. Walker stood at his command station, feeling the ship's steady pulse through the neural link. "Status report," he called out, maintaining their regular routine. "All systems normal," and replied from engineering. "The quantum field is..." She paused, frowning at her readings. "Captain, the field is showing unusual patterns, almost like it's excited about something." Before Walker could respond, Thompson's sensors lit up. Multiple quantum signatures detected. Big ones, much larger than the scout ship we encountered. Space twisted and warped as a massive Vex fleet emerged from quantum space. Dozens of ships, each one larger and more threatening than those that had attacked the stellar dawn. Their dark hulls formed perfect geometric patterns against the stars. The familiar artificial voice echoed through their communications. "Humans, you were warned. Your continued technological development has exceeded acceptable parameters. Your species will now be eliminated." Walker felt a surge of anticipation through the neural link. The Phoenix Ascendant wasn't afraid. It was ready. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered calmly. "Let's show them what humanity can really do." The Vex fleet launched their attack, firing beams of energy that could tear apart normal ships. But the Phoenix Ascendant was far from normal. Its quantum field shifted and flowed, not just blocking the attacks but learning from them, growing stronger with each blast. "They're trying to analyze our systems," Thompson reported, his fingers dancing across his console. "Just like before. But this time, we're the ones with surprises." Anne smiled as she monitored the ship's responses. The quantum field is adapting faster than they can scan it. Every pattern, they try to lock onto changes before they can understand it. The Phoenix Ascendant moved like a living thing, its hull rippling and transforming to meet each new threat. When the Vex tried to trap it in a quantum cage, the ship simply shifted through dimensions they hadn't even considered. When they attempted to disable its systems with computer viruses, the neural network absorbed the code and turned it into new defensive patterns. "Impossible," the Vex voice stated. "Your technology cannot exceed our calculations. Your chaos cannot overcome our order." Walker smiled. "That's where you're wrong. Our chaos, as you call it, isn't a weakness. It's the source of our strength." Through the neural link, he guided the Phoenix Ascendant into a complex series of maneuvers. The ship responded perfectly, its movements guided by both human intuition and advanced technology. The Vex fleet tried to predict their patterns, but there were no patterns to predict, only the flowing creativity of human thought. "Their formations are breaking down," Thompson announced. "They can't maintain their perfect geometric arrangements while trying to track us." Anne's voice was filled with excitement. The quantum field is doing something new. It's not just defending anymore. It's reaching out, connecting with the space around us in ways I've never seen before. The Phoenix Ascendant's quantum field expanded, touching the Vex ships with tendrils of pure energy. But instead of attacking, it began to share information, not in cold, rigid data streams, but in waves of emotion and understanding. The Vex ships' perfect formations faltered as they encountered something beyond their comprehension. Their technology, designed to impose order on chaos, was being shown a different way. A path where order and chaos could work together, each making the other stronger. Their weapons are powering down, Thompson reported in amazement. They're trying to understand us. Through the neural link, Walker could feel the confusion rippling through the Vex fleet. Their perfectly ordered minds were encountering something that defied their basic assumptions about the universe. They had believed that advancement could only come through perfect logic and rigid control. The Phoenix Ascendant was showing them another way. Send them everything, Walker commanded. Show them who we really are. The quantum field pulsed with human history, not just their technological achievements, but their art, their music, their dreams. It showed the Vex how humanity had grown, not by eliminating chaos and emotion, but by embracing them, learning from them, turning them into sources of strength. One by one, the Vex ships pulled back, their perfect formations dissolving as they processed this new understanding. Their voice, when it came again, had changed subtly. Your path is unexpected, different. We must recalculate. Walker stood tall on his bridge. We don't want to fight you. We don't even want to defeat you. We want to show you that there's more than one way to reach for the stars. That perfection isn't always perfect. The massive Vex fleet hung in space, their rigid patterns now flowing in new ways. They had come to eliminate a threat to their ordered universe. Instead, they had found something that made their universe larger, richer, more complex. Your species will be watched, the Vex announced, but not to restrict, to learn. As the Vex fleet prepared to depart, Anne noticed something remarkable in her readings. Captain, look at this. They're quantum signatures. They're changing. They're starting to show variations, individual differences. They're learning to embrace a little chaos of their own. Thompson laughed softly. We didn't just prove them wrong about us. We helped them discover something new about themselves. The Vex ships vanished back into quantum space, but not in their usual perfect sequence. Each one chose its own moment, its own path, the first signs of individuality in a civilization built on absolute uniformity. Walker felt the Phoenix Ascendant's satisfaction through the neural link. The ship had done more than defend humanity. It had shown an ancient and powerful race that there was always more to learn, always new ways to grow. Take us home, Walker ordered, but not before sending a final message to the departing Vex. The galaxy is big enough for many kinds of intelligence. Maybe next time, we can explore it together. As the Phoenix Ascendant turned toward Earth, its quantum field shimmering with new possibilities, Walker looked at his crew with pride. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger. They had taken their greatest challenge and turned it into their greatest achievement. The ship that had been born from destruction had become a bridge between two very different ways of thinking. And somewhere out in the galaxy, the Vex were learning that sometimes the most perfect solution was to be a little less perfect. Humanity's path to the stars was clear now, and it would be unlike any other race's journey. They would go forward not with perfect order or pure chaos.